We are privileged to have three exceptional leaders in the field joining us today. Each brings a wealth of experience and expertise to the table. So please join me in welcoming Kara Summers, Robin Apodaca, and Tina Russell. And before we delve into our discussion, I will take a minute to introduce each of them. So Kara is the Director of Legal Recruiting at Munger, Tolles & Olson. She previously held the role of Associate Director of Legal Recruiting and Legal Recruiting Manager at the firm. Prior to joining Munger, Kara was an Attorney Recruiting and Development Manager at O'Melveny & Myers and also held numerous recruiting and professional development roles at Snell & Wilmer. So thanks so much for being here, Kara. Next up, we have Robin. Robin is the Associate Dean and Dean of Career Services at USC Gould School of Law. Prior to joining USC, Robin provided career planning assistance to law students at Southwestern Law School, University of Laverne College of Law, and Chapman University Fowler School of Law. In addition to her leadership positions at several law school career service offices, she's also an active member on the National Association of Law Placement, where she was an elected member of the Regional Leadership Council. So welcome, Robin. And last but certainly not least, we have Tina Russell. Tina is the Senior Manager of Lateral Partner Recruiting at Reed Smith. She previously held the role of Senior Manager of Legal Recruiting at the firm. And prior to joining Reed Smith, Tina was the Senior Manager of Talent Acquisition at Paul Hastings, overseeing all lateral associate recruiting across the U.S., and also held recruiting positions with PricewaterhouseCoopers and McDermott, Will, and Emery. So thank you all so much again for being here. Really excited to hear from each of you. So to kick it off, we are very excited to hear how you all generate great ideas within your organization. And Kara, we'll start with you.
Thank you for the great introduction and having me here today, along with the other panelists. When I was giving this some thought, and I really think for me, it's a team effort. And so it's really about creating an environment for our team where ideas are welcome. And so I guess creating a safe space, like I want to encourage those ideas and suggestions. Obviously, not every single one is going to get implemented, but we want to work collaboratively and collectively and encouraging the input of the team. So I really encourage that. Also utilizing the resources around you. So working across departments, it doesn't all have to be on our department. That's something I've done more so recently, and really getting outside of our sort of department and getting ideas from other teams has been incredibly helpful and created some really unique and creative solutions to some things that we might not have thought of within our own vertical. And then just a couple other things, and then of course pass it along. Bringing the bigger picture into it with my team, so helping them understand the full context of what we're doing, so they feel like they can understand what we're working towards, and having that real ownership mentality. So owning the things, having that investment, I feel like that creates a lot of creativity within the team to share ideas.
Amazing, thank you. Robin, anything to add?
Yes, that was great. I like the idea of creating a safe space as well for folks to feel comfortable to share their ideas. My answer to this initially, I wrote down in my notes, was very carefully. Especially if your idea, and my team, I don't know if any of them are on the call today, but they know I'm always coming up with some crazy ideas, and I always preface it by saying, feel free to give me the pros and cons of any of these. You kind of have to leave your ego at the door when you are generating ideas as well, because they also have to be actionable items, right? Like, you can be the visionary in the office, but someone's got to carry out these actions. And so I say that, and I will remain with very carefully. And also knowing your team and knowing their capacity. The best way to get your ideas shot down is to create more work for folks, especially if they already feel overwhelmed. And so for me, I would say that's how I do it, very carefully. But I always leave the door open for other people to bring ideas as well. So I've got my own, I've got wonderful things I'd like to do with my team and the way that I would like to move my office forward. But my door is always open for them to share the things that they want to do as well.
Great, thank you so much. Tina, anything to add?
Sure. I mean, I agree with everything Kara and Robin shared. And one of the words that Kara threw out, solutions. I think going into something with thinking about solutions, right, can really get your mind going about, okay, well, if you're solutions minded, then it forces you to think creatively ways to kind of get there. So I think always having a solutions focused mindset is good. But I also want to add listening. I think just listening wherever you are, listening to conversations, or I was at the NALSC conference last week with all the, search firms, and just even networking and listening to conversations or, at roundtable discussions. I always feel like I pick up on something and then in my head, I start thinking, okay, well, how can I execute this at my firm, but tweak things in a way where it'll fit what we're trying to do at Reed Smith. So I think, whether it's even social conversations, when you're talking to people in other industries, you're going to hear ideas and things that they do that may not be legal recruiting related, but there are aspects of it that you can apply to some of the things that we're trying to do here.
That's great. Okay, thank you all. Next question. In your experience, what are some common misconceptions about legal recruiting and how do you work to dispel them? And Robin, we'll start with you.
So from a law school career services perspective, this may get people really interested in legal recruiting on the law school side, or maybe not. But I think a misconception is that law schools are a bit more, there's ebbs and flows to how busy we are throughout the year. That they're, not as busy as recruiting on the law firm side. And while that may have been the case maybe 5-10 years ago, that is not the case anymore. I feel like with all law schools, it has been, and correct me if I'm wrong, so feel free in the Q&A section to say that's not true. But I feel like we work a lot, and you all have summer classes, and I think that's wonderful. You're dealing with them on your side. We're preparing them on our side. So there's a lot of guesswork that has to do with, how each year, I find that each new class is very, very different. So while I have, my 2Ls this year were super engaged, I have 1Ls that seem to be kind of they're just in space right now. So, I feel like they are getting it. They're reading directions. They're following, they're reading what they're supposed to be doing. They're following directions, but they're not as, they don't seem to be, I don't want to say as engaged. I've said it before, but they're just not as crazy about being in our office and working with us as their predecessors. So for us, there's that. And another misconception could really just be, that it's easy to get into a law school career services office. It's actually quite hard. And you don't have to have a JD to work in this office, but you do need experience, and you do need some type of legal recruiting experience or recruiting experience in general. And so, there might be a lot of I call it circular dating. You have people coming from, the law firm to law school, and then law schools going, around, and people moving around. And, as a career services counselor at heart, I feel like people should be where they need to be and where they feel like they are doing their best work. So I don't have an opinion on the circular dating, but it is hard to get into schools. And as you heard, and I know this is going long, so I'm gonna wrap it up soon. As you heard, I was in legal, the law school career services offices with other law schools. And so getting employers on campus is different when you're at Southwestern versus at Laverne versus at Chapman. And so you have to adjust. And so there's even within working in a law school, there is also adjustment within the different law schools. So there's some misconceptions there as well. I could go on, but I'll stop with those.
Great. Thank you so much. Tina?
One of the misconceptions that always drives me crazy is that we are party planners. I feel like there's so much more to our jobs. And, you know, I've heard people say, oh, you have the fun job. All you do is plan events. And that's, I think, a very common misconception. I mean, yes, event planning is a big aspect during a summer program, but that's not all we do. We do a lot. So that's something that I've always tried to work to dispel. And how do I dispel them? I think, you know, engaging in kind of active and substantive conversations around my office with the lawyers, and just helping problem solve. I think that when you have those types of conversations where you're looking to solve problems, kind of just goes to show like, okay, I'm capable of doing so much more. I'm invested in this firm. I'm invested in this office. And so here's why I can add more value.
Thank you so much. Kara?
Yeah, I had jotted down similar notes. I said some of the common misperceptions, and generally they're outside of the legal industry, but a lot of times people think I'm, you know, part of a search firm agency. So explaining that it's internal, you know, recruiting, not a former attorney personally, some are, but really that we're not just party planners, although I said that can be a very fun and rewarding aspect of our job. But I agree that is the internal misperception that I think I had prior in my career. I do feel like I feel really fortunate the firms that I'm at now and the last firm as well. Just really, I feel like the attorneys really did recognize and understand the value that we add and contribute. And I think part of that is, like Tina said, it's all about relationships, right? So establishing that rapport, having those discussions internally, so establishing yourself as a trusted and valuable resource, having those substantive conversations. You know, we through this organization and now, and I think that's one of the next questions, but just we get to hear about different trends and things, and we can share that and really open their eyes to certain things that are coming up that they may not be aware of because it's top of mind for us, and we're, you know, this is the focus. And so adding that value, that's how I've been able to dispel it. But yeah, I feel fortunate at those firms. But if, you know, if that is the perception, I think exactly what Tina said is how I would approach it and have.
Thank you so much. Our next question is, as industry leaders, what do you consider to be the most critical factors for success in legal recruiting? And Tina, we'll start with you.
I would say not becoming complacent. I think especially in the traditional attorney recruiting role, you know, when you have OCI, summer program, planning for first years, it's very cyclical, and it's very easy to become complacent, and it's very easy to just go with the, oh, well, this is how we've always done it, and get a little comfortable. And we all fall victim to that, especially, you know, coming off of OCI and you're burnt out and you don't have much left to give. But I think it's important to just constantly stay on your toes and be proactive and, you know, come to committee meetings and say, I know we've done it this way. I think we should try it this way. Or I had a really great conversation with someone outside the industry. I learned that they're doing it this way. Let's give it a shot. And again, being prepared, I think, is another important aspect. Going into meetings, going into, you know, whether you're meeting with a hiring partner or your recruiting committee, have an agenda, be prepared to talk. If you're going there unprepared, then again, it's going to affect your credibility in your firm. And, you know, going back to this misconception of being a party planner. So you want to show that you add value, and, you know, you know what you're talking about, you know what you're doing, and you want to make things better. And so you just want to always be thinking and always, you know, keep things in motion.
Thank you. Kara?
Yeah, I was in the big picture for me, it's really about relationships. And so building relationships internally and externally. So within your own organization, with your department and your supervisor, of course, but across departments, building those relationships just help you operate so much better and be so much more effective. and it just makes it more enjoyable. And then externally, and that's what's been so fun about this, building relationships with career services offices, search firms, of course, our candidates as they come through, just seeing that trajectory. I've had candidates come through and then they go off to different firms and you interact with them and you realize you made an impact and they notice. So like one of the things I said that really makes you stand out, I think, is establishing your credibility through consistency, being reliable, responsive. It's a long career, but I think when I looked back, that seems to be the most important thing, is really thinking about your reputation. That is so important and people notice. And so if you're really proud and present yourself in that way and are consistently putting forward your best work, people do notice. It takes time to build, but that then people sort of recognize that, I think, outside of that. And the last one I said is just having a vision for what you want, especially when you step into a more of a leadership role, having a vision for the department, what you want, how you want things to operate, how you want your team to feel, how you want your team to be perceived, and then, getting in feedback from them. But having that, I think, is so important in moving things forward as things are changing and we're having to pivot and move and deal with more things that can really help bring together everyone collectively. And then you're rowing the boat in the same direction.
Thank you so much. Okay, Robin.
I had much of the same, actually. Mine was, I wrote, keep moving forward. So what does that look like? For me, it's not being complacent, right? So it's consistently talking to my team about, what are we doing to assist our students? What are we doing to continue strengthening our professional relationships between ourselves and employers, new employers, or the people we haven't spoken to yet, things like that. I think with law schools, in a law school, it may be really easy, like as you all just said, it's cyclical, right? Like we know what we do in the spring, we know what we do in the fall, we know what's happening in the summer, and it's year after year. But as students change, as technology changes, laws change, we still have to remain at the forefront of all of this. So some of the things, in addition to, keeping my team and myself moving forward, is to be open to new ideas, and to be open to trying new things. I know it requires, sometimes it's a heavier lift to try new things, but I think it's important to, as you are auditing, I audit our office every year. So one thing that we do in our office, and I'm sure other law schools do this as well, I'm sure I'm not alone, but we do have a planning meeting where we look at our entire school year and we think about things that worked and things that didn't work. And then we recreate, and then looking at the idea of what our new class is going to look like. Where are they coming from? Are a lot of them coming out of state? Should we have more programming for those folks who want to, move out of state and live and work out of state? And so all of that is keeping us connected to our students. Again, with reaching out to employers, that's also going to help us with our relationships. I mean, we're moving out into other areas. We're looking at a lot of different things. In order to be successful. And of course, and I'm going to do the plug because I use it all the time, is we just got the recruiting survey from now. Reading those things, I get, the American Lawyer magazine comes in, sometimes even Above the Law, I'm just going to say that too. But reading those, the blogs and newsletters, the Tax Prof blog, all of those things, they give us information that is helpful for us we can either use it or we can say, okay, well, that's good to know and move on. But I think it helps us to stay at the forefront, especially when we are, when we're counseling our students as well.
Thank you. Thank you all. Our next question is, in your experience, what are some effective strategies for advancing one's career within the legal recruiting industry? And Kara, we'll start with you.
Okay, a little trouble with the unmute. So one thing I thought that I've done, I got really into this a few years ago, was getting really introspective. I think there was a point in my career where I was like, I want a promotion, I want that next job, but I encourage folks to get really introspective about what are your strengths, where are your areas for growth, and what do you enjoy? Because I think I was so like, got to get that next job. but I was like, pause, make sure this position or something is something that actually aligns, because moving into something just because it seems like, you know, a promotion or a growth opportunity, it can be great, it can challenge you, but it can also maybe not be so aligned if it's just for that reason. So I think that's one thing I would encourage. Having a client service mentality with the attorneys and other departments of the firm, that is something that just got instilled with me at my very first law firm, and that has carried me through. So, you know, when the attorneys are getting trained and like, you know, think about, you know, client service first, I always think about both our attorneys, but also the departments in that way. And I feel like they really appreciate that. You know, you're responsive, you're giving them high quality work, you're prepared, and that really helps establish your reputation. And I think I talked about that before, but just continue, you know, really focusing on your credibility and being accountable and consistent. And then the last thing I would say is advocating for yourself in a respectful way, but do your research. I've had, there was my very first firm that I was at, I did feel like I had to continually fight for every tiny raise and promotion. And I know in the time it felt frustrating, but I did it. You know, I continued to go back, even though it felt, and over time it develops a skill, which is respectfully, but advocating for yourself, understanding what you're contributing. You know, we have more information now through NALP and LAALRA about, you know, I don't know, salaries and other information, but just understanding your worth and not just like letting it slide by. That would be my advice.
Thank you. Robin?
So I'm going to start with a plug. The mentor circles are the bomb. I mean, I'm old. That was our slang. So, I really honestly, I will say this, many years ago, they started this, I want to say like, I can't even say like maybe 15, 13, I don't know. That's where I met Betsy Armour. So there was a mentoring kind of pipeline that they were doing in LAALRA. And I said, this is what I want to do. You know, this is where I ultimately want to be. And at the time, Betsy Armour was funny enough, was the Associate Dean of Career Services at USC Gould. And I remember having these conversations with her and like just checking in with her throughout the years. And so what I'm going to say is look for the opportunities and the resources. And this is funny because this is something I tell students and we forget to do it for ourselves. But lean on those resources and be mindful of other people's time. And be respectful, but you never know where you're going to be. And, you know, my career path was a little bit different. I'm not afraid to say it. I started as a student services assistant at the front desk. Some of my colleagues are on the call with me now who used to work with me. Yay, Trina, who was also my boss, by the way. She was amazing, still an amazing boss. She could have also been on this panel. But the resources and the support that I had throughout my career, and I've been doing this about 20 years now, has been amazing. And a lot of it has come from LAALRA, it has come from my colleagues, and it has come from now. And so I will say, don't forget about the resources. Even preparing for this position, I was very comfortable because I had participated on the Regional Leadership Council. And it's funny because you would think, who do you meet on this, right? I'm talking to all of you. I know you all remember we were doing those surveys. We were all in your business all the time on the calls. I met so many people though, outside of this region. And I was able to call on people who have been deans for a very long time to pick their brain and to prepare to even interview for this position. And so I want you all to recognize that you never know, you know, what opportunities are going to come, but you want to be prepared for them. And so the way that I did that was just staying in contact and networking, but not in a way like, oh, I'm going to be with Dean one day. I need to make sure I position myself, but truly making friendships and listening to folks, joining, like, again, this mentoring circle. We meet on Fridays and I love it. And we talk about random things. And sometimes we just talk about, you know, Chris is going to tell me about this wonderful, you know, St. Patrick's Day party we're going to put together so we can all see each other. But in all of those things comes wonderful opportunities. You never know who's leaving a job. You never know who you can talk to. I'm happy with, and this is really long, but I'm happy with reaching out to people at other law schools to just email them and say, you know, how are you guys taking this? How are you handling this? And not in an anti-trusty way, just an FYI. But like, you know, how is this moving, and where do you see this going? So that we can adjust and we can be better counselors, and we can do better for our students. And so a lot of my career has been talking to people, leaning on people, and being happy for them to lean on me. I've done recommendation letters for people. I've done references for people when they're interviewing, and I'm always happy to do that because I had an opportunity to talk with you all and to work with you all in committees.
Thank you, Robin. Tina.
So I want to emphasize the networking, similar to what Robin was talking about. You know, all of my positions have been through people reaching out because they were leaving a role or they knew someone leaving a role and said, hey, you should apply. So you just never know. And so I think the networking and the relationships are really important, such as the mentoring circle. I'm in Robin's mentoring circle and I love our mentoring circle. A couple of other things. So I think being adaptable and flexible with kind of your style, especially your communication style, and your professional brand and professional reputation, especially around the office. You know, when I started in legal recruiting 20 plus years ago, I was always very self-conscious about, oh my gosh, do they think I'm young? I'm you know, a younger, you know, employee here. And I mean, I had partners refer to me as kiddo. And so I basically decided, you know what? No, I don't want them to view me as, you know, someone really young. Like I want to be equal to them. So I made the effort to, in all my email communications, how I spoke, like I'm going to err on being more professional. Because I want them to see me as an equal. So I think that kind of having that mindset and mentality has definitely helped. Another mindset to adopt, I think, is to think big picture and how, you know, whatever task or project you're working on fits into the big picture. And I think if you go into that, it's going to help you have more meaningful conversations. And again, it's going to help develop your credibility and, you know, kind of get you a seat at the table.
Thank you so much.
Can I add something really quickly?
Please.
It was, I don't know if it was Tina or Kara who mentioned it, but one of you said being prepared for meetings and having, you know, your own agenda. And I think that is something that speaks volumes. Being prepared is something that will definitely help people gain, you will gain the trust of others, and they will see you as someone that they can depend upon. And I think that goes a very, very long way too. So I just wanted to reiterate that because you kind of fit it in there and I was like, oh, that's a really big, that's a big one that everyone should do.
Deserves an underline. Okay, so our next question is, how do you stay updated on the latest trends and developments within the legal recruiting industry, and how do you incorporate this knowledge into your strategies? And I will add one thing. We did receive a question on the survey asking specifically about AI, if anyone would like to weave that into their answer. So Robin, I'll start with you.
Well, I think on our end, AI's internally, it's making our professors' heads explode. But so I will say, as far as looking at trends, we're constantly reviewing. I mean, we've all done this. We're looking at, should we use, you know, should we go to Flow Recruit? Is this something that's easier for students to use? Should we continue using Simplicity? There's so many different things that we look at, but we're consistently reviewing emerging technology. We're always reading articles. I share actually the NALP Digest with my dean and with my vice dean, just so that they're up on what we're doing as well. And my team is reading it. We do like to incorporate some of the topics from the NALP Digest into our team meetings that we have weekly. So that's something that, you know, we talk about, and we'll say, you know, I read something this week. What do you think about this? So those are some of the trend. That's some of the ways. It's probably the easiest way to look at trends, because I think the NALP Digest does a pretty good job of that. For AI, I went down, I personally went down a rabbit hole with AI to see how well they write resumes. And as it stands, my job is still intact because it's terrible. at writing resumes. But cover letters and diversity statements are something totally different. So they're pretty good, but vague. So while AI is not something that we tell our students to use, we know that they're inevitably going to use them. And so what we tell them is to always have their cover letters reviewed. So we've gone through the process. We know that this is a tool that students will be using, but we also are developing through our IT department, actually. It's called emerging technology and our innovative technology. And so they're putting together workshops on how students can effectively use AI and when they should be using AI. So this is something, because we know it's not going away. And so we're working with them to kind of figure out what that looks like for our students. But yeah, so those are some of the things that we're doing to stay on top of the trends. What we haven't done, and I wish we could just make it go away for now, because we've got a lot of things to do, like how the heck are we navigating OCI? But we met this trend head on instead of trying to kick it down the road, right? So the best way for our students to be competitive is to teach them how to use it, and in a way that would make them competitive in the workplace. I'm not sure how all firms and where firms are on AI, but it's good for them to know what it does and to be able to use it to their advantage, but also not expect to use it in the day-to-day workplace either. So there's a place for it. Not sure if it's like, while you're on your summer associate position or thereafter. But that's some of the things we do. I can go on about this, and this is not what it's about. So I will stop here.
Thank you, Robin. Tina, anything to add on latest trends and developments?
No, I mean, I think, again, just listening, networking, when, I get the law.com alerts, and if there's a headline, we share it with our team members. I think networking, though, is really important. I mean, just attending meetings like this, or participating in NALP meetings, but also networking with recruiting professionals in other industries. I think you can learn so much. The time that I spent at PwC, I learned so much and thought, oh my gosh, they are light years ahead of law firms. And, and I was able to bring back a lot of the processes and ideas to my firm. But I think that just always staying alert and listening and being open-minded is a great way to just, see what's going on, and then see how, what you're seeing in the market can be adapted to work in your firm.
Thank you. Kara?
The same. It's, now LAALRA networking, that's really just been the best source, and just it's been helpful in an non-antitrusty way, but just to hear some of the challenges and just be able to have that sounding board is so incredibly helpful. So I really am back to the last topic of networking. I've really seen the fruits of the relationships I've started to develop. I moved to LA in 2016, so I was kind of new to the LAALRA, new to LA, a lot of new things. But it's amazing. Like this year in particular, I just feel, wow, like I know some people, I go to the meetings and I feel comfortable. I don't feel like the kid, the new kid in the new school. And just, it's so nice having familiar faces and being able to talk to people. I've also helped mentor or talk through people who are making a move, and being that sounding board. So again, I just encourage you to reach out because it really is rewarding. I think for me to be able to kind of repay that forward, what other people have done for me. So I just, this organization and NALP have just been so great.
Thank you so much. Okay, next up, our question is, can you share any cautionary tales or lessons learned from your experiences in legal recruiting that may benefit our audience in navigating their own career paths? And Tina, we'll start with you.
So two things come to mind. The first is, and I think this is more applicable if you're in kind of a local recruiting role, is striking that balance between kind of firm-wide and management initiatives with what's happening in your local office. And I've seen this many times where I see local recruiters where, they're asked to execute some kind of firm-wide initiative, and they're kind of reluctant to do so because they're anticipating pushback from the lawyers. And I think it's really important to, at the end of the day, like, we are citizens, and, we represent the firm, and it's about just delivering those initiatives and executing it in a way. I describe it as like you're playing Jedi mind tricks with your lawyers. Like, you want to make sure they understand you're listening to their concerns, but yet you still have to execute this. And so it's a really delicate balance. And I've seen a lot of people make the mistake of pushing back to management, saying, well, this is never going to work in my office. Okay, well, how did you deliver that message? How did you deliver this initiative? How did you deliver the plan? Are you really championing it or not? And so again, by constantly, saying, well, this isn't going to work, this is going to work, I think it could negatively impact your kind of professional image in your own firm. And so you have to really learn how to balance the two kind of, I guess, competing interests. The second thing is, I think, in your profession, and I think Kara touched on this a little bit earlier, is really think about what you want to do and don't get so caught up in title. I think it's really important to really kind of step back and think about what you enjoy, and also take the time to really develop your skill set. There isn't a set timeline like, oh, I should be an assistant for 1 year and a coordinator for 3 years before I'm a manager. That kind of formula doesn't exist. It's up to each individual, but really take the time to learn the ins and outs of the job, learn the ins and outs, understand the big picture. You're not just pushing paper, you're not just scheduling interviews. Like, if you want to be a manager, there's so many more layers of it. And I feel like, too many people are caught up in like getting that quick title. So slow down, take the time to really learn it, and have that conversation with yourself and make sure you're ready for that challenge. Because being a manager doesn't just come with a title, it comes with being able to have difficult conversations with your attorneys, and, kind of getting into some of the politics of the firm that you may not be ready for. So really think about all of that.
Thank you so much. Sarah?
What came to mind for me was sort of managing the high pressure, high stress realities of what this role and job can entail, and just managing burnout, basically. I guess just, I would say, my own experience, without getting into the details, was just I found myself in a place where I was just really so completely exhausted and burned down. And I think, like, and I guess the first thing I did that I would recommend others don't do is I didn't have a fulsome conversation with my current, like, my initial employer before just leaving. I was basically like, I'm out. I just need to find something else, because I thought a new role would be the solution for me. Got into a new role. And I think what I realized very quickly is sort of like wherever you go, there you are. Like, there's something about the way that I was operating, and I was going to take that with me everywhere. So I really had to have like a really like introspective conversation with myself. What am I doing? How am I operating that is leading to me feeling so exhausted and depleted in a lot of ways? And so I also had a very honest conversation about some of the challenges I was facing with leadership, and that changed everything. So it was like being courageous in a really respectful way, but being honest and direct, and kind of having that tough conversation that I was avoiding. That was one thing. And then setting boundaries for myself. So that doesn't mean I'm going to say, I'm not working or I'm not responding to your email, but it is that I'm carving out time for myself now to make sure I am replenishing myself. So I make sure I do yoga in the morning. And if I don't do it in the morning, I'm really not going to do it. So it's really important to do that. I've added acupuncture to my routine, making time for friends and family. And again, a lot of that was me. Like, the industry doesn't necessarily demand that you do that, but I had this thought of like, this is what I need to do. And it reached that point. So I guess just being really thoughtful about creating that balance in your life. That would be my cautionary tale that I went through and came out the other side feeling much better for it. But, there was a moment where I was like, I just need to get another job again. And I just feel like that could have led to getting into a worse situation. And I just was like, if I don't confront this could just, and lead to a worse situation for me of fleeing versus being courageous.
Thank you so much. Robin?
So I think it was kind of, it was mentioned, but what I had in my notes is managing up, managing down, managing sideways.
Mhm.
So that was one of those to me throughout my career. That was something that was a skill that I learned because you could very much be I'm going to keep my head down and do the job that I was given, and as long as I'm checking those boxes, I'm doing well. I've been given responsibilities. I am handling my responsibilities, but you're not sharing what you're doing with anyone. You're not talking about how, even your own small personal wins. I think that is something that's really important as well. And keep those wins for yourself. And mine is called This Is Why I'm Hot. And that's in my folder. It's a This Is Why I'm Hot folder in my email. You can call it a This Is Why I'm Awesome, whatever you guys want to call it. But it's good to have those. It's good to have them went for evaluations because it's not easy. It's just like when you're interviewing. It's so much easier to come up with sometimes with people. And I've had this with students where they can talk about their weaknesses, but they're not really good at talking about their strengths. And I'm like, you say these things and you have all these things to say about ways that you aren't good, but tell me about the good things that you've done. And so keep that with you, especially when you're going through, sometimes are harder than others. Sometimes, in law schools, we have ebbs and flows, but we also we maintain a level of busyness. And so it's good to look back and say, hey, I made some really good accomplishments, but also share that. And not just that I'm tooting my own horn, but to share what you're doing with your superior, share it with your colleagues, and then, share it with, the people below you, if there are people in the hierarchy that are below you, because it's good to keep everyone informed on what you're doing, because that also helps build your brand, especially if you're doing well. If you're not doing well, you probably don't want to share bad things you're doing. But if you are doing well, you should definitely take note of it, manage up, let your supervisor know what you're working on, where you are. I've been lucky to not have a lot of people who micromanage me. So it's important to let them know what you're doing, because there will be a point where they're thinking, well, what the heck what are you doing all day? Why are you leaving at 6:30 or 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock? So I think that's important. And that's one thing that I definitely had to learn.
Thank you so much. We did have a few more questions, but I do want to be respectful of everyone's time. This is just so incredibly fabulous. I found myself taking furious notes on the side while trying to look forward. So thank you all. This was so wonderful.